Hello, CAD community. Welcome to our CAD Chat series. I'm Miranda Hassler, a fifth-year architecture student, and I'm here with Kurt Clandening. Kurt is a managing partner with John A. Martin and is also a graduate from Cal Poly in architectural engineering. Thank you for joining us today, Kurt.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Now, to get started, as a Cal Poly graduate, can you tell us a little bit about what your Cal Poly experience was like?
I think I went to Cal Poly back in the early 80s, graduated in 1987, so it was still pre-computers, but it was, I think the curriculum in the classroom and the education there was always great because it was more of a polytechnic school. So it was about learn by doing and about getting a job. I would say I always compare it to, because after Cal Poly, I went to Berkeley and got my graduate degree. And the difference was at Cal Poly, you learned how to build things, how to do things. And at Berkeley, it was more theoretical than it was practical. So I think the Cal Poly education to me, in one word, was very practical. It was 100% applicable to what I do every day at Cal Poly, especially the interdisciplinary classes where you work with architects or you work with construction management majors. Those were always the most beneficial because in life, we have to work in large teams of diverse people. I think some other schools, when you tend to focus on a major by major, you get very good at all the engineers working together and all the architects working together, but you never learn that you have to work across the aisle with people that have a totally different point of view than you do. And I think in that sense, the Cal Poly experience kind of forced you to look at things from other people's point of view. So it's really less about the engineer's point of view, it's about the whole project point of view. And I think Cal Poly opened us up to not just worrying about the structural engineering aspects, but think about what the owner wants, think about what the architect wants. By being in their shoes in class, by having to do that. So,
what would you say during your time at Cal Poly was your favorite class, and what was your most challenging class that you took?
Honestly, some of my most favorite classes were the first and second year artistic studios where you had to freehand draw. I think that was interesting because as an engineer, a lot of things are very ordered and rigorous and things, and kind of freehand sketching to me was very uplifting. It was interesting and it was fun. So I think in that sense, that class was great because it kind of taught me something I didn't need to know about engineering. But to this date, I can draw a perspective very easily on a piece of paper, and you can get a point across very quickly. In fact, that's one of the things I think is valuable about the Cal Poly education is that ability to use fundamental drawing skills or basic skills. And I know now with computers it's slightly different, but we just had a conference call with 10 people on a call and nobody had a screen share, and it took us 20 minutes to describe what we mean by a building tying into and something. It was like, if I just had a piece of paper, I could have sketched that in 2 seconds and everybody would have understood it. And so I think in that sense, a lot of the drawing classes were my favorite ones.
Definitely. If you could go back in time with, say, the skills and experience that you have now and apply something that you learned from working in the field to your days when you were in school, what would that be?
I don't know that I would go back and do anything different. I've sat on the ARCE advisory board and I've been active in the campus, and I think that the system is working well the way it is. The whole concept was learn in teams, work in teams, succeed in teams, and I think communal grading, as much as students don't like it these days, I think getting graded on a team basis makes you want the whole team to succeed.
Switching gears a little bit here, could you share a little bit about your career path and how you ended up in your role at John A. Martin?
Ironically, for any students out there, put everything on your resume that you do. My first internship, I got hired by an architect at SOM because I put down softball on my resume, and he was not only the person in charge of hiring interns, he was the person that coached the company softball league. And from SOM, I went back and got my master's, and then I came out and worked for the same engineers that I worked with at SOM. They had left there at that point in time, and I worked for them for about 8 or 9 years over in Asia. I lived in LA, but most of my projects were in Indonesia and Singapore and Malaysia. And then I went to work for ARCE for about 7 or 8 years as well. And great, traveled all over the world, did a lot of stuff. Wanted to be at a firm where it was more of a family, that it was more of a place you wanted to go and be with people. And I think that part of that is going back to the Cal Poly experience, because I think my first office was only 8 or 10 of us. So of course we were a great team. I think ARCE was a very large office. We had 200 people in the LA office and 4,000 people worldwide. And I think there was a lot of that teamwork was lost in the scale of magnitude, because it's very hard to organize a team of 5,000 people. So you found yourself going into smaller pockets and doing things and being counterproductive. And so when I started at John A. Martin about 18 years ago, one of my goals was I went there because it's a very traditional kind of California-based firm. It's got a great reputation for teamwork. It's well respected. And so when I came here, I had no intentions of becoming managing partner and president. To me, it was just the place where I could really do well and work with teams and hire teams. And as I started going through it, I just became more and more involved in how the operation ran and making sure that it ran like a family, like a group of people. And that just eventually led into me becoming president.
What kind of skills would you look for John A. Martin for someone who's graduating?
I would say we start with a threshold of good grades. In our mind, if you're not serious enough in college to try hard enough to get good grades, then that's kind of a reflection on your approach on life. It doesn't mean you have to get straight A's and everything, but we want to see you getting good grades in what we consider core curriculum. After that, grades become immaterial, and it's really about how the person projects themselves and how they do work in teams and how they conduct themselves in a business. Because if you can't make a convincing argument of why you want to do something, you'll never get any design done. And so you have to have a conviction and the ability to explain it to other people. And when we hire, as we ask questions of the candidates, of things like that, leading questions of, what would you do in this kind of a situation? Or if someone was, impacting your ability to do your job, what would you do? Right. And then you look at their problem solving ability. Would they engage, or would they just say, well, it's not in my court, I don't care? So those, you can kind of tell the people's personalities.
Definitely. So along those lines, do you have any advice for students as they prepare to step into the world of professional practice?
Know your personality. If you want to be in production and you want to just run numbers and you love getting on the computer and doing analysis, or if you love doing sketches, or I think be honest about that, right? Because what we get is a lot of people come and say, well, I hope to be president someday, or I hope to be project manager someday. And so we're like, okay, so your only goal is to get a title. And so when we ask people what they want to do in their careers, we're looking more for their personal goals of how they're going to be happy, not I want to be president someday. Be honest with yourself, because if you're trying to for a position and it doesn't suit you, then you're going to get the position and not be happy, which means you're going to find yourself moving later on or adapting your personality to fit the job you have.
And then Kurt, what do you think that the alumni and industry can do to help students during this time?
We actually have an internship program, and we've had to push back the start date for our intern that was coming in May, but we're still intent on bringing the interns on. But we're working from home. So I think it's hard to know how we can help now. I would say communicating more often, things like this. We've gone to a lot of virtual happy hours, virtual meetings. I would say from a technical standpoint, it's hard for the industry to say anything right now because we are in uncharted territory. There is no reason for the economy to be slow. Other than the fact that we all have to work from home, but there's not a fundamental underlying reason. It's not like in 2008 when there was a bubble in the housing market. It's not a financial crisis of the dollar. This is a bacteria. And so it's very hard for us. We're actually busier right now than we were before we all got locked out of the office, because we're doing the same amount of work. We've had very few projects go on hold, but now we're inefficient because what would take a 5-minute meeting in the office now takes a 45-minute phone call with sharing and things. And so I think in that sense, the industry is really struggling right now to just keep on their own footing. But in terms of communicating with students, I know we've been working with ARCE and stuff in terms of helping to sponsor some of the clubs. I think, the students now, even remotely, I think, if you're planning on submitting design competitions, but I would say, the best thing that students could do right now is to start thinking about projects that they've always kind of been passionate about and spend the time doing it. And if alumni or people in the industry, if they want to bounce ideas of something off of it, or they want to get a critique, I think that the industry would be more than willing, myself as well, we would be willing to get on Skype calls or something and say, great, show us what you want. Because I think when I was at school, we had advisors and we had engineers that would come to campus and architects would come to campus. And I remember one of the most impactful things was the architects just walking around the studio, not critiquing, but just saying, oh, what are you thinking here? What was your idea behind this? Why are you doing it this way? And it wasn't confrontational and it wasn't, rigorous. It was just it was a conversation. And so I think in that sense, I think the students should probably, could reach out to, alumni or people they know, or the people that they were getting their internships with, and saying, even though I'm not working with you as an intern, can you critique this project of mine or this idea or something like that.
So with everything that's going on right now, has the workflow or the way you conduct business at John A. Martin changed at all?
Absolutely. We've all become IT experts because trying to hook up computers at home and laptops and getting this thing in your ear to always connect to the one that you want to talk to has been a struggle. So I think if nothing else, it's brought everybody, including our young staff, firmly into the digital age. I think as structural engineers, because we are heavily engaged in the California Office of Emergency Services, that we had already had plans in place to be able to work remotely from the office, because in the event of a major earthquake, we have to go out and inspect buildings, whether we're inspecting it for the government, whether it's the state or the cities, or whether we're inspecting it for our clients. They provide us with our money. So we have a lot of large hospitals and schools where after earthquakes, we go out and inspect all their buildings. So we wanted to be able to have that remoteness already. So we were somewhat prepared for it. I think this has really kind of tested that. And I think it was, the first day we locked everybody out of the office, we had no VPN problems. We had no internet connection problems. And our IT staff via phone was able to get everybody hooked up at home. I think we'd been preparing for that. I think the one thing is our entire phone system is on the web, so it's digital. So my office phone rings to my cell phone, and that was what we had set up before we even left the office. And so in moving away from work, I think that was something that I have found is incredibly valuable, is to be able to communicate with people. Not everybody has your cell phone. A lot of people don't feel comfortable calling your cell phone. Oh, it's not really that important, I don't want to bother them. So I think in that sense, the use of digital technology has skyrocketed. I think I think we're all learning the drawbacks of that. It's not very efficient. It allows people to not be collaborative. I can say, Miranda, you're going to do this, and then I hit my mute button and you have to defend yourself, and I come at the end and say no. So I think it's very hard, when you're trying to communicate online, it's very hard to get your point across, and it's very hard to see if the other people are agreeing with you or thumbing their nose at you or off in the kitchen or doing something else. And so I found that getting consensus has become is something we need to work on, but I think we've already been moving into a digital age. We already do all of our markups via Bluebeam, so we don't use pencils anymore. So when the engineers and the draftsmen went off site, the engineers marked up the markups in Bluebeams, and the draftsmen and the BIM operators from their living rooms loaded up the Bluebeam session and started working in Revit, and things like that. I think it'll change the industry. I think people will stop relying on paper. This will be a quick push to move to a more digital model all around.
Definitely.
That'll be a lot outcome.